Session, we're going to be discussing specific pathways for young people who are NEET, such as technical education, vocational education, apprenticeships. The other panel is going to be discussing geography and place-based support and how that works. But just in terms of context, for those of you who have missed the Milburn Review, I'm sure nobody has, but we're concentrating on those nearly 1 million young people currently classified as NEET. The data from our 2025 State of the Nation report revealed that the NEET rate among young people has risen above 21% since 2021, and those from lower working class backgrounds are 2.5 times more likely to be NEET than their peers from higher professional backgrounds. While interventions like FE, technical, vocational qualifications, apprenticeships are there to support NEETs, there's a primary risk factor in terms of becoming NEET, and the proportion of disadvantaged pupils failing to achieve any GCSE passes rose from 5.1% in 2021 to 7.5% in 2023-24. So our session today is going to focus on whether these technical pathways are truly inclusive or merely rewarding the most job-ready individuals. We can see a rise in economic inactivity among young people. The no experience, no job cycle has never been more difficult to break. So we can talk about a whole range of things, including government incentives such as the Youth Jobs Grant and the debate over who the government, colleges or employers, who in the government, colleges, employers and other parties should shoulder responsibility for soft skills training. Our goal is to determine how to transform those pathways from exclusive corridors into genuine bridges for UK's most vulnerable young talent. So I will do some quick introductions before we get into the meat of things. So on my left, it's my pleasure to introduce Nick Bent, who's the CEO of upReach, the UK's leading social mobility charity. With 25 years in education, he co-founded the Tutor Trust and served as a UK government special advisor. He's an Oxford and Harvard alumnus. He sits on the Children's Commissioners Advisory Board and holds Manchester University's Medal of Honour. He's also, congratulations to Nick for being awarded an MBE in the King's Birthday Honours List this year. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Charlotte McGrath. Sorry,
McGrath.
we just discussed my name being mispronounced.
I've got the Irish pronunciation, so no TH at the end.
Okay, yeah. McGrath. Right, okay, got it, thank you. The CEO of Movement to Work, a coalition of major UK employers, including Tesco and Barclays, that tackles youth unemployment. By breaking the no experience, no job cycle, the network has provided 250,000 plus opportunities. A corporate communications expert, Charlotte is passionate about uniting businesses to build diverse talent pipelines. Welcome, Charlotte. Next, we have Sharon Blyfield OBE, Head of Early Careers and Apprenticeships at Coca-Cola Europacific Partners, with 30 years of experience. A champion for social mobility, she leads Coca-Cola Europacific's Partners apprenticeship strategy to dismantle recruitment bias. Leveraging her background in supply chain and HR, Sharon creates accessible pathways for young talent, earning widespread industry recognition for her impact. Welcome, Sharon. Next, we've got Craig Beaumont, OBE, who's the Executive Director at the Federation of Small Businesses. Craig is the Chief Spokesman for Small Businesses. A former Downing Street staffer, he now leads the Federation of Small Businesses Global Policy and Advocacy. He also sits on the Social Mobility Commission's Employer Advisory Group. And last but not least is Lauren, how do I pronounce your second name?
Domfe.
Domfe, thank you. The founder of Bear the Brunt, unlocking professional career pathways for underrepresented youth through sport. A former Team GB powerlifter and consulting professional, Lauren leverages her elite athletic background and lived experience to bridge the opportunity gap, ensuring talent, regardless of background, reaches its full potential. So we've taken up nearly half our time on introductions. So let's move on to some of our questions. We'll throw it open for questions, and then if there's time at the end, we'll invite questions from the floor. So Nick, we've heard about the 1 million young people who are currently classified as NEET. Of those 1 million, roughly half have no qualifications, with vocational technical routes and apprenticeships strictly requiring grade 4+ in English and maths. Does this come down to post-16 pathways that don't work, or are these young people just ill-prepared for the labour market from the start, and are these requirements inadvertently leaving the most vulnerable behind while only the most capable young people succeed?
Thanks, Alun. Yeah, I think we should definitely have most of our focus on those most disadvantaged young people. We know that fewer than half of pupils on free school meals pass their English and their maths GCSE, and that's incredibly limiting for their opportunities in onwards education or in the labour market. Interestingly, we also now have a situation, if you look at Alan Milburn's report, where 15% of NEETs are graduates, and upReach specialise in supporting undergraduate students from very disadvantaged backgrounds to get into top graduate jobs. The outcomes for our young people, our upReach associates, are incredibly strong. And interestingly, a big chunk of those unemployed graduates are computer science graduates. And that's because people have been piling into computer science degrees in recent years. But the labour market shifted really rapidly because of the impact of AI. It's so interesting how quickly that's happened. So the entry-level graduate jobs for computer science graduates and other STEM degree subjects have fallen off a cliff. So there's a real issue there as well. But we should focus on the most disadvantaged. We know that there's good advice, there's best practice out there in terms of what teachers can do to help more young people from challenging backgrounds do really well in English and maths. So we need to give better support and training to teachers to embrace all the lessons and all the learning from the Education Endowment Foundation and the work they've done around closing those attainment gaps in maths and English. We should be giving more support and more sophisticated ways for young people to approach resits if they need to do a resit in places like FE colleges and elsewhere. We should be giving more support to the specialist charities out there who give amazing extra high quality support to young people in the form of one-to-one or small group tutoring, so people like Tutor Trust, Action Tutoring, Get Further, and so on. And there's lots of good stuff in Becky Francis's curriculum review around alternative ways to look at testing the competence and the confidence of young people in English and maths, including GCSEs, but other ways of testing that sort of fluency in English and maths as well, whether it's functional skills or more vocationally geared qualifications in English and maths that are particularly relevant to employers. So there's lots more we could be doing in this space. I think the evidence is there. We just need to get on with putting those solutions into practice.
So if I press a little bit, so the English and maths qualifications we're talking about, English language, not literature, because it's language that is about reading a text critically, understanding nuance, hidden meaning, understanding how to build an argument, marshalling evidence, and so on. And maths, clearly, is so important in every area of work because of data and the way in which all of that drives so much technology. The level that you have to get to pass GCSE in either English or maths at grade 4 is remarkably low. And yet we've got huge numbers of young people at 16 not able to do that. Is the problem going to get solved by playing about with the qualifications at 16, or is there something more fundamental that we need to face up to for those young people in terms of their life challenges? If they've reached that point at 16, aren't we just trying to patch that up by pushing them through a qualification when actually there's a more fundamental issue about good quality literacy and numeracy? If so, what's the answer to that?
So I agree, and I think there's a case for having parallel qualifications in English and maths other than just GCSE for some young people that might be more engaging for them and more relevant to the post-16 routes that they want to choose into further education or apprenticeships or work, absolutely. But as I said, there's also, I think, frankly, a challenge for the teaching profession to do a better job of helping young people who come from really challenging backgrounds, who are struggling with English language and maths, to learn better in the classroom in those subjects from primary school right up to GCSE. A lot of the resources and guidance on how to close those attainment gaps is there. It's not yet been embraced as fully by the teaching profession and by all schools as I would like to see.
Thank you, Nick. I'm sure people have questions on that, but we'll go to Charlotte next if we can. So it's clear that academic requirements like grade 4s are a significant hurdle, but Charlotte, if we, even for those that do meet those benchmarks, we often see a second but equally frustrating barrier, this no experience, no job cycle. So we know qualifications alone aren't enough, but how can we scale up kind of pre-employment programs to ensure that they serve as a proper bridge into a career through whatever the pathway might be?
Yeah, very good question. So The no experience, no job cycle, as you've described it there, is still the top reason that young people tell us they're struggling to get into work. Now, that's a perception thing as much as anything, but the frustration of repeated rejections is often put down to that. I don't have anything on my CV, I can't show what I'm good at, and until I get in the workplace, nobody will know what I'm good at or what I'm capable of. So they perceive this as a very significant barrier for themselves. And we know that this generation coming through are, as a cohort and generally, no less qualified than any previous generation. 84% of young people reported through the Alun Milburn research that they want to be in earning or learning environments. They have had inconsistent work experiences through school. And that's part of their background. And as we were discussing earlier and hearing earlier, there's a dramatic reduction in their opportunities to get work experience through Saturday jobs or part-time jobs. So what they haven't had the opportunity to do is apply their skills and build confidence in a real workplace. And then they can't take that into an application process. So the work experience element becomes a really critical bridge, and that's something that we specifically work on with employers to offer those opportunities. First thing to say, I guess, is we need to meet young people where they are, because not all of them are ready for work experience. So there are a number of different steps that can help somebody get towards that. And those who are furthest from the workplace will need perhaps insight days, perhaps some virtual experiences. There are a number of different ways to get them ready to be in the workplace, because you don't want that to be a negative experience for them or for the employer. You don't want to switch either party off to that being a route for them. And then when it comes to, they're ready for work experience, you can bring them on. I think what we're advocating for is to make sure that there is a consistent quality of experience. And that also helps with the scalability, because if we all know what it looks like and what good looks like, then we can apply it more and more organisations can take it on and embed it. And for us, quality involves a number of different factors. So one of them is that these opportunities need to be inclusive. They cannot be CV driven, because you end up with the same problem. They need to be accessible, so they need to be local, they need to be, transport needs to be available, all those things that we've touched on earlier today. And they need to be visible. And I think this is a big challenge as well, because there's, of the million that we are talking about today, there are a large number who are directly engaged with DWP and might be going regularly and have opportunities put in front of them. And in some ways, they're the fortunate ones. There are a number of others that just don't have visibility of these opportunities, and so there's a bit of visibility challenge there as well. These experiences need to be supported. We cannot just put young people into work experience environments and working environments without support, both from, we work with lots of partner organisations that are brilliant at this, and also within the organisations, which is something we touched on just now, Sharon. The organisations themselves need to have that resource and that capacity and that care for the young people to help them be their best when they do get these opportunities. It needs to be meaningful. It needs to be at least part of it in person, in the real workplace, doing meaningful work. Otherwise, we're missing the opportunity entirely. And I think one of the really important things here is that no matter what the outcome, everybody gets some good, positive, personalised feedback, so that always a work experience placement is a positive experience that they can take forward on their CV and help break that cycle. But the ultimate goal, and where it works really, really effectively, is where these work experience programmes are structured in such a way that they effectively are a pipeline into entry-level jobs or early careers programmes. So they are actually the pipeline to select people who are well suited, who really like the environment, and bring them into actual work opportunities. And too often, work experience is treated as a standalone piece. And it's great to bring them in, and it's lovely that they get something they can talk about, but actually channeling and funneling those young people into work is the ultimate goal. So we do need to have those entry-level jobs and those apprenticeships available.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. So employers besieged with people seeking work experience. You've got colleges, schools, charities. Who should be the coordinating body, or should we not have one?
It's a really good question. So I think if you're going to really scale this across the UK, embed standardised work experience placements and programmes that hopefully actually are aligned to, you know, the real goal here is align them to where we have skills deficits, where we have in-demand roles, in-demand skill types. And that will need some national and regional coordination. So I'm a big fan of regional coordination. That's where the jobs are, and that's where individuals find jobs, and they want to stay near their communities and their homes. There is a role for government in that, I think, but it changes the shape of the system. And I think that systemic change is what's needed to really shift the dial.
Interesting one, thank you. Sharon, picking up some similar themes. So once individuals finally break through into the workplace, how can organisations better support them so that this future talent actually stays and thrives?
And I think that's the biggest challenge. So you've overcome lots of hurdles. You may or may not have gotten your grade 4 or higher. You may have had some work experience, no work experience, and then you finally walk through that door on day one, having gone through however many hurdles to get that role. And the job's not done. That's actually just day one in reality of doing that job, because an individual will walk in, they won't have the confidence, they won't have the knowledge, and if you're walking into a big corporate organisation, you will not be the finished article walking in. And it's quite easily at that point for organisations to lose those individuals if we haven't put the right support, resources, development in place for the individuals. So I almost see it as day one is the first day of the journey, not the fact that the individuals have gotten into an organisation. And I think it's all the unwritten rules. So when we started, and as I look around the room, there are more mature individuals in this room, but when we started, we didn't know what the rules were. And so why should that be different? You know, 20, 30 years on in a career, we have to show the rules. We have to be able to demonstrate that the individuals are the people we want in our organisation just by the actions that we do with them. And we have to give them the opportunity and be responsible for creating the right conditions for them to thrive and actually begin their career, because most people will be working for a very long time, and they're the ones who are going to have to go back through that same cycle of then bringing more people into an organisation. And I think there are a number of shifts that we as organisations will need to make in order to ensure that we retain those individuals within not only our work environment, but just in the world of work, simply because just because somebody's gotten a job, if they don't like it, they'll leave, and they may not get another opportunity because they don't feel it's necessarily worth it. And we do have this viewpoint that somebody coming in, well, they've got the job, they're the finished article, so they need to be able to swim. And actually we end up letting them sink because we don't put the rest of the foundations in place for them. And we need to be able to keep them afloat. So if that's by giving them, I've got lots of analogies by the way, but if that's by giving them the float that helps them to progress, that's fantastic. You know, we will have apprentices come into the organisation. Why on earth would they be the finished article? By the very nature that they're coming in as apprentices. We're there to give them the technical expertise, but shape them in the world of work. We've got graduates coming in, and we were talking about this earlier with the whole debate about, you know, Oxford and Cambridge, you are not supposed to work whilst you're at those universities. Now, it was something I wasn't aware of until a friend's daughter went to university to Cambridge last year, and she was explaining that. So if you don't have the work experience as a graduate, we can't just assume because you've been to university that you're also going to be ready for the world of work. And so we need to ensure that we've got the structured supports in place. I've got lots of notes on this, but most importantly, we need to boost the confidence that you have come into the world of work, you are starting your career, and you will be supported, and more importantly, you are valued when you come into that world of work. And if we lay those basic foundations, then we are on that journey, that the journey doesn't end at that point.
Thank you. So again, one quick question. So at Coca-Cola, does that approach apply to every role that a young person might take, or ones like apprenticeship programs and graduate programs? Would it apply to casual roles, first-time jobs?
So it's a really interesting, an interesting point. So we have a structured induction route for all of those who come on a structured program. But everybody is inducted, everybody, because we've broken that ceiling of young people coming into the organisation, and the previous government's Kickstart programme really helped us then with those who were direct hires in, who came from, who had been furthest away from the labour market, and that shifted the dial for us in terms of how we bring young people into our organisation, whether that be via a direct hire or otherwise. But we now have our youth councils. So if you are under 30, you get the opportunity to become one of those members of the youth council, the ambassadors. So you get to meet people who are, or who have come in via different routes, and you form that community as well. And that's been a real positive move.
Excellent, thank you. So from large employers to SMEs and small businesses, Craig, clearly buy-in from the private sector as a whole is really important in terms of thinking this question through. And we know that businesses are being incentivised to take on more NEETs, specifically apprenticeships and youth jobs grant and support for apprentices and so on. What policy levers would most effectively incentivise a business to take on a NEET, and what's our assessment of the current levers that the government is offering?
Thank you. Federation of Small Businesses, 150,000 members, we represent the 5.7 million businesses in this country. For us, this whole area is very, very personal. Our headquarters is in Blackpool, somewhere that Alun knows fairly well. And so every policy we come out with, we actually put it through what I would call a Blackpool test. With this work, thinking about ourselves as an employer in Blackpool, where 7 of the top 10 most deprived local areas in the UK are in Blackpool, has the most kids in care. Any policy you do in this area must work there. And if we analyse the reasons why there aren't enough opportunities going to this group, the number one thing we get back is cost. So part of what we heard this morning is absolutely true. It is now, if you ask 100% of small employers, would you take someone on if the cost was slightly less? 49% say yes. And actually, of those who employ young people, it rises to 57%. So you can't get away, in the end, something we heard this morning about costs. So what do you do about costs? And I think some of the levers that have been announced are really good. We've described them as a game changer. It's the son or daughter of Kickstart, which we loved Kickstart, thought it was great. We saw some opportunities to make it work better for smaller employers rather than for large, because it's quite hard to engage with. But we've been gunning for that for those who are furthest from work. And that is what the government has announced. It's now rolling out in stages, 6 areas now, I think 25 next. So, and it is working, so we want to see that as fast as we can, UK-wide. The SME apprenticeship incentive is really good as well. And if you play all these schemes together, they are, and the number 10 person used this word to me and I can't get it out of my head, they are stackable. So if you take someone on in a small business, if they are an apprentice, if they are taking on a foundation apprentice, you can add up, 3, 5, and you end up with potentially £8,000 for one role. Now that tackles at the heart the cost problem with that one role. Now that doesn't work across the whole economy, but you can then target that. Where are these areas? How many people get this? And let's see how that works. But we are really, really pleased with that. I would say there's more that we would like to see. So I think expanding the jobs guarantee is one of the areas that we would like to look at. Angela said this morning about sick pay from day one, fantastic. But sick pay costs right now for an average small employer are about £5,000. So if you suddenly make sick pay from day one, which is what the government has done, but you should have a small employer rebate in there as well. I'm not sure Coca-Cola would qualify for a small employer rebate. I'm not sure you'd need a few £100, but maybe you do. But we really could benefit from that. And I think if you target it at the areas where it's most needed, I think that'd be really good. But I've got one plea on policy, and that is to this whole room, as well as the politicians who've left and not here to hear it. It is not just about employment. The thing that's missing in policymakers is that people want to leave and set up their own business to the self-employment. It's always missed off, but there are 4 million self-employed in this country versus 16 million employees in the private sector. It is forgotten. But if you're sat there, you're in an area and you've got a fantastic idea for something, what do you do about it? Where do you go? Where is the support? And you won't get that at the moment from walking into a job centre. You will not get that within the youth guarantee, and there should be I can't think of a better word at the moment, but an entrepreneurship. It sounds so wanky to say entrepreneurship, I'm sorry, but it's not the right word. But something about setting up on your own. You've got a good idea, you can find a social platform to push it out on. There is a ladder that is available, and policymakers are ignoring it. So that's where I would just say, don't forget about that.
Thank you very much. That was going to be my follow-up question for you, Craig.
Sorry.
Because I think you're absolutely right about that. I think we don't talk about enterprise anywhere near enough. And I think there's a lot to be done. I'm sure it will come up in questions. So shall we move on to Lauren? So Lauren, we know that some employers are still hesitant because they believe young people aren't always industry ready in terms of their soft professional skills. So to make this system work for the long term, we need to decide who's actually accountable for that transition. And whose responsibility do you think it should be to fund and deliver this kind of support for young people in developing what become actually the things that make their employability work?
Yeah,
most?
and I think that's a great question, and I think I'll pull on my lived experience first before hypothesizing who should own basically the accountability model. But before I joined Cambridge as a student, I was homeless for about just under a year, so this fell during the COVID period. Prior to that, I was council housed and was basically jumping from house to house. Both my parents graduated with a bachelor's around when I was 16. And so I was lucky enough to watch my parents study and graduate as I was in school. And so when I did fall into a period of homelessness, which fell just before the Cambridge application cycle, I already had an anchor in my mind saying, okay, this is the process and this is how you can almost move your social capital from X to Y. When I joined Cambridge, I joined the Powerlifting Society because I realized everybody does something here, and I didn't realize sport was another element of social capital that I ultimately did need for my CV to apply to these corporate careers. But the only reason why I did know that was because of who I was around and not because of where I came from. And so I say lucky in the sense that all my eggs kind of fell in place because my environment changed enough to shift me from lower income to getting a job as a Big 3 consultant straight after university. With that being said, the reason why I did think that the process for me to get into that job was because this consultancy realized that they were employing people from the same social class. And as a result, people like myself who did go to the same university weren't getting the job because we didn't know that in first year you had to do a spring week in order to get the work experience, for second year to apply for internships, in order to roll that over into third year for the full-time role. What they did do was a mentorship program, which is come in, tell us about your biggest achievement. Could be anything, could be a sport, could be a society that you did, and we will consider you for mentorship to help you shift into the internship experience. What that means is the intangibles that I built up through doing sport were valued in an economical sense that I didn't see was worthwhile. However, not every single job values these intangibles like this consultancy is doing. I'm seeing now that there's more action being taken to employ young people from non-traditional backgrounds. And so it doesn't even have to be through an Oxbridge University or through Russell Group University, but if you do a degree apprenticeship or if you have been working as a waitress or something, still put it in your CV and we will consider you. However, the barriers that are now emerging is, and I think we are under talking about it in the government, is AI now, because the way AI screening CVs is almost in the traditional sense because of who is engineering these AI models. And so we're going back to that cycle of, okay, now it may not be a traditional recruitment process and you may not be doing 6 stages of an interview, but you are having to do put your CV in through a computer model, which is analysing your CV against a traditional good CV, and before you even get seen or read by a human, you're out. And so as a result of this, I think the model of accountability really changes and depends on how you look at it, because if you look at it in a traditional sense, for more traditional careers like infrastructure, I say, for example, the government and commissioners should probably fund the participation and pre-employment layer, and I mean the layer before you even get to the work experience. So help put these young people into sports and help them build the capabilities to wake up on time and to be accountable, and to, do you know how to problem solve with a team, and do you even know how to communicate, and are you able to be social around your colleagues? The next layer is employers should define the real workforce demand. So what are the exact roles that what is the exact roles that we do need labor for? Instead of doing a blanket work experience program and nobody gets a return offer because we don't actually need you, we're just doing this to tick off a box and say, ESG, woo, like we did it. And then the next layer is allowing contractors and allowing smaller organizations to also plug in with technical training to take the burden off the government and these employers, because what I did read in the NEET report is the pastoral burden for these young people coming in is way more higher for these smaller businesses. Smaller businesses cannot put a graduate recruitment lead, there is just not enough money for it, whereas a bigger conglomerate is able to put multiple graduate recruitment leads to follow the graduate through the first 6 to 12 months of their employment, and allow that contrition rate to fall and allow retention to increase, and also show them the different pathways within the organization that they probably weren't privy to. However, now once you add AI, the question is who owns the upskilling model of the population as well, because it's one thing being neat in a traditional workforce, it's another thing being neat when you don't even know how to prompt generative AI to help you write your CV. And so I think that's another layer in which we need to figure out who is accountable for it.
Excellent, thank you very much. Loads in there. I won't follow up because I'm sure there's lots of people with questions to ask. So shall we open it up to the floor? We've got people with microphones. Should we take, they've just gone to get the microphone, so just bear with us a second. Okay, there's the gentleman here and the gentleman there, so 1 and 2.
Thank you. I had to drink because my throat's drying up. It's really good hearing from all of you, and thanks so much for sharing your lived experience and your professional experience. My question is, if neurodiverse and disabled young people are more likely to be quote-unquote NEET, what targets will institutions publish to measure where education, employment and support systems can be more inclusive? So that's my question in terms of what can organisations publish to ensure that education, employment and support systems are more inclusive? And education, not just beyond the academia, because I went university as well, but labelled academically incapable in terms of being neurodivergent. So I was really keen in terms of what is your metrics and what is your measurements or suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take 2 questions at a time, so we can take the second question.
Thank you. I guess my question's for Sharon and Lauren, because you touched on it. Just wanted to touch on the levers the government can pull to sort of encourage more employers to offer entry-level opportunities. So you mentioned, Sharon, how successful the Kickstart program was for your organisation, and I hope that can be replicated with the jobs guarantee. But I wanted to hear what your thoughts were on reopening the FlexiJob Apprenticeship Agency register. Because I think, and how that would impact your early career sort of decision making, offering more apprenticeship schemes. Because I've spoken to so many employers who say it's too much of an administrative burden, like Lauren said, to offer apprenticeships to young people. And research, I think, from the Edge Foundation showed that I think it was 68% of surveyed employers would be open to offering an apprenticeship, but system complexity holds them back. So I'm currently exploring it with the funding policy team at the DWP, but I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are and if that would be beneficial.
Thank you. Should we do Sharon, Lauren? Who wants
Got
to
lots to unpack in that one, isn't there? I think for us at Coca-Cola, we're in a privileged position because we have the internal resource to be able to support the whole apprenticeship journey and link it to our workforce planning, and therefore what we're what the individuals are, the numbers that we're looking for within that. So I don't think for us personally, any introduction for any form of agency is really going to help us, because we're really, really clear about the individuals. If it helps us to access more individuals, that's a totally different matter. Because for me, it's just another agency that you're then having to deal with. I can understand how that might work more so from an SME perspective, but less so for a larger corporate organisation. It's just somebody else you have to interact with. The Kickstart worked for us, and as you said, son or daughter of Kickstart, I think will work for us again, purely and simply because it creates other opportunities, other pathways to bring young people in. But what it will do is it will probably close the pathway for somebody else to come in. So i.e. we use a lot of agency within our manufacturing. So I would switch off the agency or the level of agency in order to bring in via this route, which means that somebody else loses out at that particular point.
Thank you. Lauren?
I think I'm going to view your question in both like a short-term fix and a long-term fix. In very literal, tangible terms, I think a short-term fix is very literally outsourcing the pastoral care that is needed for these young people. So whether it is a subsidy from the government in order for you to afford an organisation looking after your graduates for 6 months. Because what then can happen is you learn about your graduates, you learn the processes needed to keep and retain these graduates. You also, everybody is different, right? Everybody comes from different intersectional backgrounds, whether it's a care leave or someone from a lower socioeconomic class, someone who did go to a great university but simply does not know how to articulate themselves, somebody who doesn't know what accountability means in terms of your line manager. Is your manager supporting you and helping push you and encourage you to get to the next role? That's a short-term fix in my eyes. A long-term fix without modelling it economically is that there is a specific pathway provided by the government for each small, medium-sized organisation to at least have one social worker on the ground, one social worker that can come in and help these young people. Because I think what the issue is, if you feel like you're not being seen, you're going to leave. And what's going to happen is the cycle of neatness is going to continue, because they get in, they leave. This is not working out for me. And mentally in your head, you've kind of signed out of the idea of, okay, maybe just working in general is not for me. So the bottom line is empowering these young people to not only get in, but realize that this is their place as well, and you can stay, but we are making an environment palpable for you to stay in.
Thanks, Lauren. I know Craig wants to come in. I also want to come back to the first question too. So Craig, do you want to go next?
On both questions, the question on measurement is fascinating, because in politics, everything is a numbers game, and metrics drive, and targets drive. I agree with that. My issue is what you measure and how you measure has an impact on what you then do. So thinking about this, what metrics could be applied to businesses? I would argue if you're a small business, we've seen it in apprenticeships, we've seen it everywhere else, if you gum things up with too much paperwork, you end up disincentivizing exactly the thing you want more of. So I would just kind of plea for that, put it through maybe a small business test before you have that measure to see how they'll have to report on it. Maybe make those measures more based on the people you're trying to get to and the schemes that are now being launched. That feels like a good metric, because at least then it's attached to the person and you're getting directly at the problem, rather than starting from scratch, going to 1 million small employers and going, how many people have you employed? I'd love to know what happens to people in the schemes, the 6-month paid placement. What do they do next? Thinking about the cycle, what happens with them next? Do they get a job somewhere else? Do they get a job there? Do they move into training? What is the post-scheme outcome for that individual? That for me would be a key metric. And then on your question, I think there is something in terms of schemes about the new enterprise allowance, which was removed. One of the reasons this is moving people from benefits into self-employment. It was really good, lots of wraparound support. And at one stage, we heard it was being cancelled because it was too successful. I find that extraordinary in public policy. If something is so popular and so developing what it does, but they can't cope with the numbers, then take another look. Don't just cancel it. So we would like to have a more effective version, new enterprise allowance coming in. And one question I probably have on Kickstart 2, our jobs guarantee, is your point about it displacing other roles is absolutely vital. That scheme mustn't be used either to offset existing schemes and make things easier that would have happened anyway. I think what Treasury would call dead weight. You shouldn't have that. It has to be genuinely new things that don't disadvantage someone that would have been in that role. So I think there probably is something in the scheme design that can be done. I want every small business associated to create a whole new job. It should not have been a job they would have created anyway. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Should we take, I think you were the very fastest hand there, so we'll take 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thanks. So pathways for NEETs can't be designed in isolation from the systems that the young people are often navigating, and these systems are looking increasingly different with divergence in welfare and skills systems and architecture in Scotland versus England, for example, but also increasingly within England itself. We've seen the Greater Manchester Baccalaureate and other more devolved schemes, and we're likely to see more of that with the change of leadership. So what does genuine cross-jurisdiction learning on NEET pathways actually look like in practice? Were they either flattening that devolved difference or using it as an excuse not to share what's worked, or at least to try and do those comparisons? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Lauren, I thought you made some excellent points, and we could spend hours discussing all of them, but there's one you made about sport, which really resonated. I think sport and extracurricular activities really help young people get the skills, like teamwork, leadership, resilience that they need in the workplace. And I guess my question, and the networks as well, my question is, what do the panel think that government can do to drive greater participation in those activities at school?
Thank you. Okay. Should we take the last question and we'll do all three together?
Hi everyone, thank you very much for this panel. I'm 20 years old and I run a charity in the northeast of England to mentor state school students into top universities. So just trying to bring together what Charlotte was saying and a bit of what Nick and Craig were saying as well. One of the huge problems for young people that I've found in the northeast is region and the idea that they have to get out to get on. We have a very, very London-centric system at the moment for opportunities for young people. So in terms of navigating that space and overcoming some imposter syndrome, how do you on the one hand level that you have to move out of where you come from to have a good job in the future, and B, you have to feel at home there? How do you try and level those two things together?
Excellent, thank you. So 3 questions. Let's do them in reverse order then. Who wants to take up the Leave to Achieve challenge? Nick, want to have a go?
Yeah, thanks so much. It's a huge issue in this country. I was born and brought up in Manchester, did 15 years in London, and then been back up north, running a couple of charities for nearly 20 years now. And it really, really annoys me how just absurdly London-centric every single aspect of our national life still is. It's insane. It really is. It's bad for social cohesion, it's bad for social justice, it's bad for our economy as well. We absolutely want London and the South East to carry on thriving and growing, but we need the rest of the country to grow even faster and to catch up. And I think young people particularly bear the brunt of that. And the Social Mobility Commission under Alun's leadership has done some fantastic work on how do you tackle this problem that geography seems to be destiny in this country. I do think that, faster, bigger devolution is a big part of the answer, and that has been shown to work in various combined authorities under the leadership of various mayors around the country, which is fantastic. And to the earlier question, they do actually share a lot of their lessons. They're constantly robbing each other's best ideas and best policies to implement in their own areas, rather than constantly trying to sort of reinvent the wheel, and that's a healthy, positive thing. I do think that, regardless of your political affiliations, the prospect of a new Prime Minister who both understands the Westminster and Whitehall system, but has also spent nearly a decade as mayor of in my view, one of the greatest city regions of the UK. Apologies to colleagues from the North East like yourself and Hillary. And all that Andy Burnham has learned about partnership with the business community, working cross-party, driving inward investment and growth, but also in Greater Manchester, as in other combined authorities, a huge focus on more and better opportunities for young people in the education system, apprenticeships, skills and training and so on. The prospect of all that experience and learning going into the heart of government in number 10, I think is genuinely exciting for this country.
Thank you, Nick. Anybody else want to have a go at that question?
I'll probably just come in on that question. So we're fortunate that we are based as an organisation, Scotland, England and Wales. So we can have our regional place-based roles, our manufacturing sites, you know, we look at that local community to bring into that local community, but then we have our sales teams who cover the whole of the UK. So it's a choice that the only people who don't really give too much of a choice to is probably more so our graduates, because we have an expectation that they will move around the country for their various rotations, but everybody else has a choice in terms of where they work for us in the organisation, and should they choose to then move geographically, that's their choice. I'm a London girl, that's where I grew up, but I don't live in London anymore, but I'm commutable to London, and I think that's the difference for me, is that I don't think you have to be in London to have a great career.
Thank you, Sharon. Craig, do you want to go next?
Yeah, just quickly, I think sometimes the impression is London's paved with gold and all you need to do is get London and you get there, and it's not true. We have significant issues around poverty in London that we need to address too. But I don't think what we have to get away from is people having to move. I don't think people have to move. I think people are being motivated to move because of lack of opportunities. So the two prongs about doing stuff, one would be, yes, do national programs, but just like London is not paved with gold, the answer probably isn't going to be designed in Westminster that's going to help in Blackpool, for example. So you need to have two prongs. You have to have good national schemes, but you have really anchored, well-developed local schemes based on what the local community wants. So you do have the new mayors, you have local authorities, you have some power there. You're going to get more under a devolutionary agenda. But what is the target for social mobility for those schemes done there? So I would make sure that's baked into those plans as they're developed.
Thank you. Let's move on to the sports question then. So what do we do to drive more learning through sport?
I think like a one-word answer would be incentivization. One thing about this country is I've learned is tradition and structure is everything. So you do school until 18, you apply to university. Once you go to university, you write your CV up and you get a job. And we look kind of sideways to people who take the leap of faith and join a football academy, or take the leap of faith and don't go into university and decide to pursue sports. If we look at our American counterparts, on the other hand, sports can be used to get into college, and the sports that you do in college can be used to find your graduate job. That is because you're incentivized to do sport during your entire youth. If we were to try and make sport to be seen as valuable economically beyond going to the stadium to watch the footballers and the Olympics happening randomly once every 60 years here, we need to show them that the intangibles that you do get from doing sport are very valuable to this changing economy, especially as with AI coming and with organizations expecting you to be able to adapt super quickly on the spot to new AI systems and new AI organizational structures. They want you to be able to problem solve and communicate and work in a team and basically take the risk and be risk averse. But you can only do that if in your youth you had experience being risk averse and not super linear in a classroom doing what's been said and what's been done. And so my whole big thing is, and what I am trying to do is pursue the entrepreneurship platform pathway and build like a sports tech platform to help these young athletes bridge into careers. But what needs to happen is it's almost trickle down. It has to be employers saying that, okay, we're actually gonna divert away from traditional recruitment and we're gonna actually see these intangibles in these young people, and they may not have done a traditional role before, but we do trust that the rugby they were playing for 12 years did give them some kind of structure in order to communicate and work in a team. And if we give them the technical knowledge, then they'll actually will be able to, in 6 months, do the job that we're telling them to do. And so it's a play between incentivization and then taking the risk from the employer side.
But I would come in on that though. So I went back to my old secondary school that I hadn't been back for decades, and it was a bit of a shock because when I was there we had cricket pitches, rugby courts, tennis courts, netball courts. We had everything. We had huge playing fields. They're no longer there. They're built on their housing. So what you also need to have in order for that to happen is for the schools to have the infrastructure for sports to take place and the environments for sports to take place in, so that if we can't have work experience, but they're building those same transferable skills in that sporting environment, you've got to have the places to go to be able to do the sport as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else on the sports question, or should we move on to the third question? So this is about learning across different areas. So I think we comparing Scotland with England, but certainly if devolution is part of this package, that's going to become more important. So what can we say about how we foster that learning across different areas? Who wants to have a go?
Well, I guess I'm sort of building on what I said before. Devolution is about power in the right place, but it also creates competition, which is normally what you talk about in business. So having people develop schemes that they're proud about and shout about means you can then copy and paste it. Devolution is not about one body doing it and everyone else mustn't do it. It actually should be about trialling new ways. Look at apprenticeships, where you have a different version of apprenticeships in England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, also. Actually, I'm just testing out my own name, I got that right. You see it across all different parts of policy, and if you see something that works, you should have the right to copy it. These are not copyrighted. So I think try both prongs. Do have good national schemes work, but also allow experimentation and steal every experiment that works.
Thank you. Should we do two last questions? Any more questions people want to ask? Yes, somebody over there. Anybody else? And did you want to ask again? Yeah, so the woman in the corner there, further over. Thank you, Neil.
Hi, Anna Morrison from Amazing Apprenticeships. And Alan, I've been really reflecting on a point that you made this morning about isolation and wondering about how we create something that bridges our young people who might not be feeling connected to community, to group, to family, to opportunity at all, and get them ready for the opportunities that employers are potentially going to be opening up. And how the charitable sector, volunteering, activities, re-engagement, developing a passion for learning and life again, and kind of where does that fit as part of this NEET pathway? That we start to relook at the individual and actually what would any of us need if we were stuck at home, not engaged, and kind of to build that confidence. So I'd be really interested in the speakers' experiences of how perhaps current schemes or past opportunities could play into that. Thank you.
Who wants to start? Charlotte?
Yeah, so I'm really interested in this particular area. So what we are a coalition of employers, but we are a network of many parts. The network is employers who want to lean into this space and support more young people into work, and then also an entire network of youth organisations that do the brilliant work that you're describing. And this also, I think, is linked to the regional question, because it's there are some brilliant nationwide charities that we work with, do a lot with the King's Trust, who are incredible at supporting young people to get to where they need to be, either from an entrepreneurial perspective or in terms of getting into work and fulfilling their potential in a number of different ways. But we also work with lots of smaller charities and organisations that either support from a regional perspective, so they're really grassroots, they really understand that local community, the experiences of those young people, and they help build them up, meet them where they are, and build them up to where they are ready to experience the things that employers will be able to offer. So they play an incredibly important role, I think. And we also work with lots of organisations that works with young people from specific backgrounds or with specific challenges and barriers. And again, they just have such incredible insight, understand the young people, and they are much better placed than the employer in the first instance to be able to get that young person to a point of confidence in order to take up those those different opportunities as they're offered, and then work with the employer. It doesn't stop on day one. Work with the employer to make sure that that experience is a valuable one on both sides of the equation. So I think they play an incredibly important role, and they certainly do in our network.
Thanks, Charlotte. I know Nick wants to come in, then I'll bring others into. Nick?
Yeah, I can completely agree with that. And I think this challenge is about to become even more acute, because we've been running, in my view, a failed experiment on young people around smartphones and social media for quite a few years. We are about to force under 16s, to have a new relationship with their phones and with social media. And that makes it even more pressing that there are opportunities in real life for young people to engage with others and enjoy other elements of life, whether that's the arts, drama, sports, volunteering, Duke of Edinburgh, Scouts, whatever it may be. Incredibly life-enriching opportunities that are good for young people to do in and of themselves, but also have massive advantages and benefits in terms of greater engagement with education and better preparedness for the workplace as well. That's a task for everyone. Government has a role as well, I think, to give a bit of credit to the Labour government and Keir Starmer's part of his legacy. There's a huge amount of extra money going into those kind of enrichment opportunities for young people. The Pride in Place investment will also give that a boost as well. But this is becoming even more acute given that we're about to ban under 16s from social media.
Thanks, Nick. Craig.
Yeah, I think, because we chatted earlier, and it did make me think, we've also got a member in here, Sue's FSP member, who she creates the fledgling work stuff, helping young people to connect with employers. And there's a website called upReach, which I've heard about through the SMC, about getting small employers ready. So I just think this is about making 1,000 flowers bloom. There's going to be lots and lots of people who are interested in this agenda, who want to do good stuff. So how do we, I mean, it sounds corporate, but do we need a kind of mapping system? Do we need to work out what it looks like currently in terms of the network of charities, NGOs, small businesses, major businesses, all doing stuff that they don't know anyone else is doing? And if you took a picture of that, look at the mayors getting the new powers, look at new initiatives coming from, the person who's got the most upward mobility ever, which seems to be Andy Burnham. You've got lots of things happening, but no one has a global view, and maybe that's where SMC can come in and perhaps look at that, and maybe we can bring it all together somehow.
Interesting point. Thank you, Craig. Right, one last question then. Sorry, so I know you've asked one before. Well, let's do two then. There's one there and one at the back. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Emma Gregory. I work for the King's Trust, and thank you for that mention earlier, Charlotte. Nick, you just mentioned about supporting young people to become prepared for work. I'm just wondering what the panel thinks about supporting more businesses to become prepared for the future workforce. We are one of the first of the 6 partners for Jobs Guarantee, and a lot of the work that we are doing is supporting businesses in the local community to really start to understand what support young people need. And I do feel too often it's all about the young person having to change too much rather than businesses also sharing that load. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we answer that question? Well, let's take the two together and then that's fine. Thank you, Neil.
Thanks. At first, when we started talking, we talked about the most disadvantaged, and it feels like that's not really who we're talking about. And there's this group of people that are nowhere near to university, nowhere near to the job market, but actually are having real life problems, probably being failed by schools. And I've got some lived experience of talking to 2 young people yesterday about county lines. They're working in trap houses. They've been attacked. But I'll tell you what they are. They're quite entrepreneurial and resilient, but they're probably going to be criminalised for it. And I think there's lots of people who have got opportunity, but these people have been failed, haven't got the opportunity. What's the pathway for them? Because they're also in supported accommodation, which means the option of work isn't really an option, because then they'd have to move out of the property. So I think they're right at the start of the journey. And actually, yes, people need to be supported into university and work and all those other options, but these are the most vulnerable and disadvantaged.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what my question is.
I think I kind of get your question. So that's 2 questions then, really. One is about, should employers be more flexible in terms of responding to young people? And I think the second question is, are we sufficiently focused on the truly disadvantaged, or are we missing something in this debate?
So I'm quite happy to come in and then, so in terms of employers being ready, I think that goes back to what I said earlier on, so with the whole Kickstart. When we brought Kickstart in, we weren't ready. We had to break a few not metaphorically, a few bones in order to be able to bring it all back together and almost break that perception of somebody coming into our organisation who wasn't corporately polished, who hadn't gone to, you know, the local school up the road that everybody knows and all of that. And so we went through that journey and it was a pain point for us and we made mistakes and we've learned from that. There'll probably be other mistakes we'll make, but I think we are in a better place than where we were previously with all of this. So we're still on a journey. It takes a lot of time to, I guess, break the tradition and the expectation within that. But it is a huge focus for organisations, and I would know within the food and drink organisation we often talk about how prepared are we for the young people coming in. But I think we'd be even less prepared for young people who may well be on the county lines, who may well have criminal records, because as a big global brand, it's, well, you've kind of got your blueprint of who you think you should have coming into your organisation. So we will then work with and talk to organisations who can help us prepare for young people who have got that entrepreneurial mindset, who would do wonders within our organisation as we're looking for the creatives. How do we support them so that they don't go back into county lines? Because we did, through Kickstart, have a number of these young people who were referred to us, who we worked with, but we weren't really prepared for them.
Thank you. Anybody else on the employer question? Then we'll do this one. Should Lauren and then Craig?
I was going to answer the county line.
Oh, we'll come back to that one then. Craig, then?
Yeah, I think something that strikes me is there's a risk of patronising wrong groups, and I think we talk about this group sometimes in patronising terms, we other them, which is horrible. I also think we have a risk of patronising the small business owner as well, so I think it has to be very carefully done. I think it should be, if you think about how a small business operates, it's generally more like a family unit, and that's not a bad way of describing it. When you're inviting someone new in, there'll be kind of some norms, some expectations, but it won't be formalised. There won't be, I'm sure Coca-Cola has fantastic policies on documents on everything, but we don't have that. So which is good in some ways and unhelpful in others. The good stuff is that a small business can change quite quickly. They will be the person who takes the punt on someone who doesn't fit a mould. They don't have the mould. So they'll be just looking for what else they can get to reassure themselves about the right person, but they probably will need help in what the expectations of the modern young person is. You know, perhaps it's the first teenager they've ever taken on, and I think there is an expectation now that's probably different to 20 years ago or 10 years ago. So I think there is something to do, but just keep tabs on the tone.
Thank you. And we'll come back to the last question, the truly disadvantaged question. Lauren, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so a bit different to your example, but my dad was an immigrant and obviously came. He went to London School of Arts and studied film and TV and then attempted to start his own videography and film and photography company. And so my mum would work as a nurse and then we'd kind of fill that money into his business. Ultimately, it did fail, like after 15 years of him trying. But what I did see in him trying to bridge into entrepreneurship versus me trying to bridge into entrepreneurship is if you were not privy to the networks that you get from university. University is like the first barrier, number one, because most of these grants require you to have gone to university and put in a university name. Second of all, they require you to fit into either like tech or like there's specific areas that they look to fund versus other alternative areas. And so for young people that are coming from the county lines, like drug dealing, et cetera, and they don't have much lived experience in business in general, but they know that they want to own a business, the language itself is very off-putting when you're trying to apply for a grant, if you even know that grants exist. And so I don't even think there's like one website which lists like every single grant that's available in this country for all different types of businesses. Yeah.
They're not even close to
exactly,
setting up of a bit. They're left behind, and we still keep talking about university. But even if they weren't in county lines or they weren't in that university, I didn't go to university. I feel like that rhetoric around university is in all of these things. It's not. Some people don't want to, and some people it's not even an option. But it still feels like the focus of these things.
Yeah.
Which is, it just seems a bit disappointing, really.
Does anybody else want to come back? I might wrap up on that point.
I think the solution is to bring it closer to the people versus closer to the institution. How we do that in the methodology, the methodology around that is still in the air, because where do you even find these people to begin with? Is either you go to them in the homes, and the social accommodation itself doesn't even accommodate for a desk. When I lived in social accommodation, some of the rooms had no desk, no computer, there was no internet. It was a hotel internet that barely worked for all the rooms. And so the accountability has to lie with, first of all, is it the council that even offers a place, a library space that is dedicated to these young people to even go and navigate the internet before they even begin the entrepreneurship journey? Like, how do we bring the solutions down to earth for them?
Thank you. I think your question is a really good one to finish the session on, because I think it's a very thought-provoking one. My concern about the Millbury Review is I'm not sure it's bottomed out, that really hard issue about, yes, but within the NEET group, there's a group who are very truly disadvantaged. I'm not sure it talks enough about crime, drugs, risky behaviour. I'm not sure it talks quite enough about how far behind some young people are educationally, how far away they are from the labour market in terms of their knowledge, their skills and their behaviours. I just think that you're pointing at exactly the right question, really. And I think it's one to leave with everybody over